I should have known a wedding could feel like a funeral when the flowers smelled more like goodbye than love. The chapel was packed shoulder to shoulder with people who smiled too brightly, whispered too softly, and looked at me like I was the luckiest woman in Brooklyn. White roses climbed the aisle in perfect arches. Candles trembled along the windowsills. Rain tapped against the stained glass in thin silver lines, turning the afternoon light gray and cold. I stood in the bridal room with my hands folded over the front of my dress, trying to look like a woman about to begin her life instead of one preparing to disappear inside someone else's. My name was Emily Carter. I was 26 years old, a second-grade teacher, the kind of woman who owned 3 pairs of comfortable shoes, bought coffee with coupons, and still cried when one of my students handed me a crooked drawing with my name spelled wrong. I did not belong in a 6,000-square-foot chapel filled with politicians, bankers, donors, and women whose earrings probably cost more than my car. But Ryan Whitmore belonged there. Ryan always belonged in places like this. He was polished, calm, handsome in a way that looked expensive. His family name opened doors before he touched the handle. My mother called him a blessing. My friends called him stable. Everyone said I was safe with him. Safe. That word had followed me for the past year like a hand on the back of my neck. Ryan was safe because he never raised his voice in public. Safe because he sent flowers after every argument. Safe because he knew exactly when to smile, when to hold my hand, when to make people believe I was cherished. Maybe that was why my fingers kept closing around the small silver bracelet hidden inside my palm. It was old, scratched, and too cheap for a wedding day. A thin chain with one tiny moon charm, dull from years of being touched in secret. I had worn it under sleeves, kept it in drawers, slipped it into coat pockets, and told myself 100 times to throw it away. I never did. Ethan Blackwell gave it to me when we were 18, on the hood of his old pickup truck, 2 miles outside town where the streetlights ended and the fields began. He had tied it around my wrist with hands that shook just enough for me to notice, then told me, "No matter what happens, I'll find my way back to you." The next morning, he was gone. No goodbye. No letter. No explanation. Just an empty desk at school, a disconnected phone number, and a silence that swallowed 12 years of my life. People told me first love always felt bigger than it was. They said I had romanticized him because I never got closure. Maybe they were right. Maybe Ethan had been a boy with too many secrets and not enough courage. Maybe Ryan was the future I was supposed to choose after waiting too long for a ghost. A knock came at the door. My mother stepped in, already crying, already fixing the veil around my shoulders. "It's time, sweetheart," she whispered. I looked at myself in the mirror. White dress. Pale face. Blue eyes trying not to break. In my hand, the bracelet cut softly into my skin. I should have let it go. I should have placed it in the trash, walked down the aisle, and said yes to the man waiting for me. Instead, I closed my fist around the last piece of the boy I had buried in my heart. And somewhere beyond the chapel doors, thunder rolled so low it sounded like a warning. The walk from the bridal room to the chapel doors was only 30 feet, but it felt like crossing the distance between who I was and who everyone needed me to become. My mother held my veil with trembling fingers. My bouquet shook in my hands. The organ music rose through the walls, soft and holy, while the storm pressed against the stained glass like it wanted inside. When the doors opened, every face turned toward me. 200 guests rose in perfect silence. White roses lined the aisle. Gold light shimmered over polished wood. Ryan stood at the altar in a black tuxedo, smiling with that calm, practiced confidence that made people trust him before they knew him. His father stood in the front row with his hands folded over a silver cane. His mother dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Everything looked beautiful. Everything felt wrong. I stepped forward because that was what good daughters did. That was what grateful women did. That was what women did when everyone had already decided their happiness for them. One step, then another. My heels clicked softly beneath the music. My pulse beat in my ears so loudly I almost missed the way Ryan looked at my closed hand. The hand hiding Ethan's bracelet. His smile did not disappear, but something behind it tightened. A warning. A claim. I looked away and kept walking. By the time I reached the altar, my throat felt too small for breath. Ryan took my hand, gentle enough for the guests to see, firm enough for me to understand. "You look perfect," he whispered. "Not beautiful. Perfect." Like I had finally become the version of myself he had been arranging all year. The minister began speaking. Love. Commitment. Family. Sacred promises. The words floated around me without landing. I stared past Ryan's shoulder at the rain sliding down the tall windows, and for one impossible second, I imagined a different life. A dusty pickup truck. Summer grass. A boy with dark hair and laughing eyes tying a cheap bracelet around my wrist like it was something precious. Then the minister turned to Ryan. He said yes before the question fully ended. Clear. Smooth. Certain. A soft laugh moved through the guests, charmed by him as always. Then the minister looked at me. "Emily Carter, do you take Ryan Whitmore to be your husband?" The chapel became too still. My mouth opened. No sound came out. Ryan's fingers tightened around mine. My mother shifted in the front row. Someone coughed. The rain struck harder. I tried to force the word up from my chest, but it caught behind something old and aching. That was when the chapel doors opened behind us. Not slowly. Not gently. With a deep wooden sound that cut through the room and stopped the organ mid-note. A cold draft rushed down the aisle, carrying rain, leather, and the sharp scent of the storm. Every head turned. I did not. Not at first. I only felt it. The air changing. The room shrinking. Ryan's hand went rigid around mine. Then I heard footsteps. Calm. Measured. Heavy against the stone floor. I turned, and the bouquet nearly slipped from my hands. A man stood at the back of the chapel in a black suit, rain darkening his shoulders, his white skin pale beneath the gray light. He was taller than I remembered, broader, carved by years I had not been allowed to witness. His dark hair was pushed back from a face that looked familiar and impossible at the same time. A black tattoo curled from beneath his left cuff, climbing over his wrist like inked smoke. Men in dark suits stood behind him, silent as shadows. But I did not see them. I saw his eyes. The same eyes that had haunted every birthday, every lonely Christmas, every morning I told myself I was done waiting. Ethan Blackwell looked down the aisle at me as if 12 years had been nothing but a locked door he had finally broken open. Ryan stepped in front of me. "Leave," he said, his voice low enough to sound polite and cold enough to frost the candles. Ethan did not look at him. He looked only at me. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, rough, and steady. "Do not say yes, Emily." My heart forgot how to beat. The bracelet in my fist burned like it had come alive. And the ghost I had mourned for half my life stood in the doorway, breathing. For 1 second, nobody moved. The chapel held its breath around us, 200 guests frozen between scandal and disbelief, while rain whispered down the stained glass like a secret being told too late. Ryan's hand was still wrapped around mine, but his grip had changed. It was not the gentle pressure of a groom. It was the quiet command of a man who had just realized something he owned might walk away in front of everyone. "I said leave," Ryan repeated, louder this time. His voice carried through the chapel, smooth on the surface, sharp underneath. Ethan took 1 step forward. Then another. His black shoes left faint wet marks on the stone aisle, each one slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore. The men behind him remained near the doors, not speaking, not moving, yet somehow the exits felt farther away than they had a minute before. I heard whispers ripple through the pews. Someone said his name. Someone else gasped. My mother covered her mouth with both hands. Ryan's father rose slowly from the front row, his silver cane tapping once against the floor. "Blackwell," he said, and the way he spoke Ethan's name made my skin go cold. Not surprised. Not confused. Afraid. Ethan's eyes flicked to him for less than a second, then returned to me. That tiny glance told me more than any explanation could have. These men knew each other. This was not a ghost walking into my wedding by accident. This was a past I had never been allowed to understand entering through the front doors in a tailored suit and a storm. Ryan stepped down from the altar, placing himself between us. "You are interrupting a private ceremony." Ethan stopped halfway up the aisle. His face gave away nothing, but his wrist shifted when he adjusted his cuff, and I saw more of the tattoo curling over his skin. Black lines. Clean edges. A date hidden among the ink. My chest tightened before I knew why. Private? Ethan asked quietly. You invited half of New York to watch you buy a future you never earned. A few guests stirred. Ryan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Careful. You are not in your world here. Ethan looked around the chapel, at the white roses, the candles, the polished pews, the frightened faces pretending not to stare. Then he looked back at Ryan. I am wherever she is. My name did not leave his mouth, but I felt it anyway. A pull deep in my ribs. A memory with hands. Ryan gave a small nod toward the side aisle. Two men in suits I recognized as his private security moved forward, but they stopped before they reached Ethan. Not because anyone touched them. Not because anyone threatened them. Because the men at the back of the chapel took one silent step in. That was all. One step. The message passed through the room without a single raised voice. Ethan Blackwell had not come alone, and whatever he had become, the world had learned to make space for him. You brought your circus into a church, Ryan said. Ethan's expression remained calm. You brought a lie to the altar. My stomach turned. Ethan, I whispered. His eyes softened when they found mine, so suddenly it hurt. For a heartbeat, I saw the boy from the pickup truck. The boy who used to toss pebbles at my bedroom window. The boy who once walked 3 miles in the snow because I had said I hated being alone during storms. Then the mask returned, colder and stronger. Ryan turned toward me, his smile back in place for the guests. Emily, sweetheart, do not let him confuse you. He has always been good at disappearing and making it someone else's fault. The words hit exactly where they were meant to. My throat closed. Ethan saw it. His jaw tightened, but he did not defend himself. Not yet. That silence scared me more than anger would have. Step away from my bride, Ryan said. The chapel went still again. Ethan looked at Ryan for the first time fully, and the air seemed to drop several degrees. She was never yours to keep. My knees nearly gave out. Ryan reached for my wrist, the one holding the bracelet, but I pulled back before he could touch it. It was a small movement. Barely anything. But both men saw it. So did I. For the first time that day, my body had chosen before my fear could stop it. Ethan's gaze dropped to my closed fist. The coldness in his face cracked. Not much. Just enough. His voice changed when he spoke again, low and rough, meant only for me even though the whole chapel heard it. Open your hand, Em. I should not have obeyed him. I should not have let a man who vanished 12 years ago walk into my wedding and command anything from me. But my fingers slowly unfolded. The silver bracelet lay across my palm, dull and trembling in the candlelight. Ethan stared at it like it was the only holy thing in the room. The bracelet looked too small for the silence it created. A thin silver chain. One tiny moon charm. A cheap piece of metal I had carried through college, through lonely apartments, through birthdays where I pretended not to check the door. But Ethan stared at it like I had opened a grave with my bare hands. The chapel blurred around me. I could still hear the guests breathing, the rain tapping against the windows, Ryan shifting beside me with controlled impatience, but all of it felt distant. Ethan took one step closer, and for the first time since he entered, his power did not feel like the thing that filled the room. His pain did. It moved across his face quickly, almost too quickly to catch, but I saw it because I had once known every version of him. The boy who laughed with his whole chest. The boy who hid money in my locker when he knew I skipped lunch. The boy who kissed my forehead one time in the rain and looked more frightened by tenderness than by any storm. You kept it, he said. Not a question. A wound. My fingers curled around the bracelet again, but not before his eyes followed the movement like he was afraid it would vanish. Ryan gave a soft laugh behind me. Sentimental theater. Very impressive. Ethan did not answer him. He was still looking at me. I thought you threw it away. My voice shook before I could stop it. I tried. His jaw tightened. Good. That single word hurt more than if he had denied everything. Good. Like the years I spent missing him were an inconvenience. Like the nights I cried into my pillow at 19, 21, 24, where something he was relieved I had almost buried. My face warmed, but my hands went cold. "You do not get to say that," I whispered. The room was so quiet that even the front pew heard me. "You do not get to walk in here after 12 years and look wounded, because I remembered you." Something changed in his eyes. The control cracked again, wider this time. "Emily." No, the word came out small, but it held. "You left. You disappeared. Everyone told me to move on, and I had to stand there and let them. I had to grieve someone who never even gave me a body to bury." My mother made a broken sound from the front row. I did not look at her. I could not. If I looked at anyone else, I would fall apart. Ethan lowered his gaze to the floor for 1 second. When he lifted it, the man from the doorway was back, but something softer lived beneath him now, something exhausted. "I came back," he said. My breath caught. Ryan went still. Ethan turned his wrist slowly, pushing back the cuff of his black jacket. The tattoo I had seen before came fully into view. Black ink wrapped around his pale skin in sharp, elegant lines. At first, I saw only the date, October 17th. Then I saw the small letters hidden beneath the curve of the design. E.C. My initials. My heart stumbled so hard I pressed a hand to my chest. "That was the night I tried to come back for you," he said. His voice dropped lower, rougher. "I made it within 2 blocks of your house." The chapel seemed to tilt. My childhood street flashed in my mind. Maple trees. Porch lights. My bedroom window glowing yellow in the dark. "Then why did you not knock?" I asked. Ethan looked past me at Ryan, and the air turned sharp. "Because I saw men outside your home who were not there to protect you." Ryan smiled, but the skin around his mouth had gone pale. "You are telling stories now." "No," Ethan said quietly. "I am telling her why loving me used to be a death sentence." The words hit the chapel like thunder without sound. I looked at the bracelet in my hand, then at the tattoo on his wrist, and for the first time, the empty years behind me did not feel empty. They felt locked, hidden, guarded by people who had built my life around lies. Ryan reached for my elbow, his voice smooth again. "Emily, this is exactly what men like him do. They confuse you with tragedy, then call it devotion." I pulled away before his fingers settled. Not far. Just 1 inch. But Ethan saw it, and Ryan did too. My veil shifted against my shoulders. The candlelight shook. Outside, rain slid down the glass like the whole sky was unraveling. "Tell me the truth," I said to Ethan. "Not the part that makes you look noble. The truth." He looked at me for a long moment, and in his eyes I saw the boy I had loved standing inside the man the world feared. "The truth is," he said, "I did not stay away because I stopped loving you. I stayed away because every road back to me led through people who would have used you to reach me." My throat burned. "And today?" His gaze moved to my wedding dress, then to Ryan, then back to my face. "Today they finally did." Ethan's last words did not echo. They landed. Quietly. Heavily. Like something placed on my chest that I could not lift. "Today they finally did." I looked from him to Ryan, then to the guests sitting beneath the soft glow of the chandeliers, their faces frozen. In polite horror. My wedding had stopped being a ceremony. It had become a room full of people waiting to see which version of the truth would survive. Ryan smiled first. That was what terrified me. Not anger. Not shock. A smile. Smooth, careful, expensive. The kind he used at charity dinners when someone asked about money he did not want to explain. "Emily," he said gently as if I were a frightened child. "You are overwhelmed." He planned this. Men like Ethan Blackwell do not come into churches for love. They come for control. Ethan reached inside his jacket. Every person in the chapel stiffened, but he moved slowly, calmly, and only pulled out a cream-colored envelope. He held it out toward me between 2 fingers. One of his men stepped forward, took it, and brought it to the altar without a word. Ryan's father struck his cane once against the floor. "Do not touch that." My fingers stopped above the envelope. That command told me more than any confession could have. My hand closed around the paper. It felt thick, official, cold from the rain. Inside were photographs, bank records, and copies of messages printed in black ink. I did not understand all of it at first. Names, dates, transfers, a private investigator's report. Then I saw my own name, Emily Carter, repeated again and again. My address, my school, my mother's apartment, the coffee shop where I met Ryan for the first time. My breath thinned. Why is my name in this? I asked. Ryan stepped toward me. Give it to me. I moved back. His face changed for half a second. The public mask slipped, and beneath it was something cold enough to make my skin tighten. Ethan saw it too. Tell her, Ethan said. Ryan laughed once softly. Tell her what? That you built an empire in the shadows and now want to pretend you are the victim. Ethan's gaze did not move. Tell her why you chose that coffee shop. My fingers shook as I looked down again. The report said Ryan had known where I worked, where I lived, who I had loved, and what names still appeared in the sealed juvenile records from a town I had tried to forget. Ethan Blackwell. My first love had not walked into my life again by chance. Ryan had walked into mine. Because of him. I looked up slowly. You knew, I whispered. Ryan's eyes flickered to the guests, then back to me. I knew you had a complicated past. No, my voice broke, but it did not disappear. You knew Ethan was alive. The chapel went so quiet I could hear rainwater dripping from Ethan's coat onto the stone floor. Ryan's mother lowered her handkerchief. My mother stood, her face pale and lost. Ryan exhaled through his nose, still trying to look patient. Alive is a generous word for what he became. Ethan did not react. That was how I knew the insult had touched something old. Ryan turned toward the crowd, using them now, performing for them. This man is dangerous. My family has spent years keeping people like him away from respectable society. Ethan's voice cut through the performance. Your family spent years hiding what they did to mine. Ryan's father took one step forward. Enough. Ethan glanced at him. I agree. Another envelope appeared in the hand of Ethan's associate. This one went to the minister, who opened it with visible reluctance. His face drained as he read. He looked at Ryan, then at me, then closed the folder as if it had burned him. Miss Carter, he said softly, I cannot in good conscience continue this ceremony. A sound moved through the chapel, part gasp, part storm. Ryan's smile finally vanished. You have no authority to make that decision. But I do, I said. The words surprised even me. Small, but clear. I looked at the man I had almost married, and suddenly all the careful moments rearranged themselves in my mind. The questions about my past. The way he disliked my old friends. The way he convinced me that safety meant obedience. The way he proposed in front of my mother so saying no would feel cruel. I had thought he was building a life with me. Now I understood. He had built a stage. And I was the invitation Ethan Blackwell was supposed to be unable to ignore. Ryan lowered his voice. Emily, do not embarrass yourself. It was the wrong thing to say. Something inside me went still. Not calm. Strong. I looked down at my wedding ring, the diamond flashing under the chapel lights like a beautiful lock. Then I looked at Ethan, who stood silent, not reaching for me, not ordering me, not saving me before I asked to be saved. For the first time all day, neither man moved me. I moved myself. I slipped the wedding ring off my finger so slowly the whole chapel seemed to lean closer to watch it happen. It should have been simple. A circle of gold and a diamond Ryan had chosen without asking what I liked. But it clung to my skin as if the past year had grown teeth. When it finally came free, my hand felt lighter and colder at the same time. I placed the ring on the open Bible between us. The tiny sound it made against the page was softer than a breath, yet Ryan looked at it like I had shattered something priceless. Emily, he said, and there was warning in my name now. Not concern. Not love. Warning. I lifted my veil with both hands and pulled it from my hair. Pins fell loose. A curl brushed my cheek. Somewhere in the front row, my mother started crying harder, but this time I did not know if she was grieving my decision or finally seeing the cost of the one she had helped me make. You do not get to speak to me like I am a mistake you are trying to correct, I said. My voice trembled, but it reached the back of the chapel. Ryan stared at me. You are confused. No, I said. I was confused when I thought comfort and control were the same thing. I was confused when I thought being chosen by your family meant I had been valued. I was confused when I ignored the way my own stomach hurt every time you told me what was best for me. The guests were silent now, but not the way they had been when Ethan entered. That silence had been fear and spectacle. This one felt different. Heavier. Like people were realizing they had been invited to witness a marriage and were instead watching a woman return to herself. Ryan's jaw tightened. You were making a public scene because a criminal brought you a folder. Ethan took one step forward, and every candle near the aisle seemed to flicker. I turned to him before he could speak. Do not. He stopped immediately. The obedience in that small pause shook me more than his entrance had. Ethan Blackwell, the man everyone in the room feared enough to whisper about, stopped because I asked him to. His dark eyes held mine. No command. No claim. Just waiting. I swallowed through the burn in my throat. You do not get to rescue me into another cage either. A shadow crossed his face, fast and painful. I know. 2 words. Quiet. Barely there. But they changed the air between us. Ryan laughed under his breath. This is absurd. Emily, step away from him. I looked at the man I had almost married, and for the first time, his expensive suit, his perfect posture, his polished voice did not make him seem powerful. They made him seem small. I am not stepping toward him, I said. I am stepping away from you. Then I turned from both of them and walked down from the altar alone. My dress whispered against the stone. My bouquet hung loose in my hand. I passed Ryan's mother with her frozen face, his father with his silver cane, my own mother with tears shining on her cheeks. No one stopped me. Maybe they were too shocked. Maybe they finally understood that a woman does not need permission to leave a life that is quietly suffocating her. Halfway down the aisle, my heel caught in the hem of my dress. I stumbled, just enough for every head to move. Ethan's hand lifted by instinct, but he did not touch me. He let me catch myself. That was when I almost cried. Not when the truth came out. Not when the wedding stopped. But when the most dangerous man in the room loved me enough not to mistake my stumble for surrender. I straightened, kicked off both heels, and kept walking barefoot across the cold chapel floor. The silver bracelet was still in my fist. The ring was behind me. The future was somewhere ahead, blurred by rain and fear and a boy who had become a storm. At the doors, I stopped without turning around. If you have more truth to tell me, I said, my voice steady now, then you can say it outside. Not in front of people who came here to watch me belong to someone. For a moment, nobody answered. Then Ethan's footsteps followed, slow and respectful, keeping distance between us like it mattered. And somehow, after 12 years of silence, that distance felt like the first honest thing he had given me. Outside, the rain was colder than it looked through stained glass. It hit my bare shoulders, slipped under the edge of my dress, and turned the chapel steps dark beneath my feet. The city beyond the iron gates sounded far away, all tires on wet pavement and distant sirens blurred into one long breath. For the first time that afternoon, I could hear myself thinking. Or maybe I could hear the part of me that had been quiet for too long. Ethan stopped 3 steps behind me. Not beside me. Not close enough to touch. The space between us was full of 12 years, a ruined wedding, and every question I had swallowed until it became part of my bones. I looked down at my bare feet on the cold stone and almost laughed. I had walked into that chapel with a veil, a diamond, and a future everyone approved of. I had walked out carrying a dying bouquet and a bracelet from a boy who was supposed to be gone. Start talking, I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Ethan exhaled slowly. The night I disappeared, my father found out the Whitmores were using his company to move money through fake charities. He was going to expose them. I turned then. Rain slid down his face, but he did not blink. His black suit clung to his shoulders. The tattoo on his wrist looked darker wet, the date almost alive against his white skin. Your father owned a garage, I said. That is what you told me. That is what I wanted you to believe. The answer should have angered me. It did. But beneath the anger was something worse. Grief for a boy who had been lying because his life had never been as simple as mine. My family was already tied to things I did not understand, he said. Old debts. Old names. Men who smiled in public and made decisions in private rooms. I was 18. I thought if I stayed away from that world, it would stay away from me. His eyes moved to the bracelet in my hand. Then I met you, and for a while, I believed I could become someone else. My throat tightened, but I refused to soften too soon. So what happened? My father trusted the wrong person. By the time he realized it, the Whitmores had already prepared a story that made him look guilty. That night, everything collapsed. Accounts were frozen. Friends disappeared. Phones stopped working. I was told if I went to you, your name would be pulled into it. I remembered that week in pieces. My parents whispering in the kitchen. A strange car parked across the street. My mother telling me not to answer unknown numbers. I had thought grief made memory strange. Now they rearranged themselves with sharp, terrible clarity. You came to my house, I said. He nodded. I saw 2 men outside. Not police. Not neighbors. They were watching your window. The rain seemed to stop touching me. My window. His jaw flexed once. I was close enough to see your light on. Close enough to hear your dog barking. I had your bracelet in my pocket because I had bought a second charm. A star to match the moon. His voice broke on the smallest word. Star. It hurt more than any dramatic confession could have. I stood there for 10 minutes. I knew if I knocked, you would come with me. And I knew if you came with me, they would never let you go back to being just Emily Carter. I pressed the bracelet against my chest. You made that choice for me. Yes. No excuse. No noble speech. Just the truth. And I hated myself every day for it. A black car waited at the curb, engine running, windows tinted, men standing near it with their hands folded in front of them. None of them looked at us directly. Somehow, that made the whole thing feel more real. Ethan was not just the boy from my past. He belonged to a world that moved quietly around him. A world that obeyed before he spoke. How did you become this? I asked. He looked toward the street, rain catching on his eyelashes. At first, I wanted protection. Then I wanted answers. Then I wanted enough power that no one could ever use you as leverage again. He looked back at me. Power is dangerous, Emily. It gives you doors, but it also teaches you to forget which rooms still have light in them. My fingers closed around the bracelet. And Ryan. Ethan's expression went still. Ryan knew. I was watching the Whitmores. He knew I would never come near you unless you were in danger. So he created a danger beautiful enough to invite witnesses. My wedding. My dress. My mother crying in the front row. All of it turned cold inside me. He was baiting you. Yes. Ethan took one careful step closer, then stopped when my eyes lifted. But he miscalculated one thing. What? You were never bait. His voice lowered. You were the only person in that room brave enough to walk out without waiting for a man to carry you. My eyes burned. Not because he praised me. Because the boy I had loved was still in there, buried under ink and silence and power, and he had finally learned that love was not possession. Behind us, the chapel doors opened. Ryan stepped into the rain, his perfect tuxedo untouched beneath the covered entry, his face calm again, too calm. Emily, he called. Come back inside. We are not finished. Ethan did not move. He waited for me. And that was when I understood the choice was finally mine. Ryan's voice slid through the rain with the same polished certainty he had used at the altar, but outside the chapel, without music and flowers and 200 witnesses holding me in place, it sounded different. Smaller. Colder. He stood beneath the stone archway, dry under the covered entrance, while I stood barefoot on the steps with rain soaking my dress and washing the last of the chapel perfume from my skin. Come back inside, he said again. You are upset and you are making choices you will regret. Ethan remained beside the curb, silent, hands relaxed at his sides. His men did not move. The black car waited with its engine humming softly through the storm. Everyone seemed to be waiting for him to take control, but he did not. He looked at me once, then lowered his eyes, giving the moment back to me. That quiet restraint did something no command ever could. It steadied me. I turned toward Ryan. I am finished being spoken to like a problem. His expression barely changed, but I saw the irritation flash behind his eyes. You are standing in the rain with a man who has spent years building fear around his name. You think that is freedom? Looked at Ethan then. The tattoo on his wrist. The rain in his hair. The distance he kept because I had asked for it. No, I said. I think freedom is finally being allowed to decide where I stand. Ryan walked down one step. You do not understand what you are doing. That is what you always say when I do something you did not approve first. The words came easier now, each one cutting a thread I had mistaken for love. When I wanted to keep teaching instead of moving into your apartment. When I wanted a small wedding instead of this display. When I wanted to invite my old friends, and you told me they would not fit. His jaw tightened. I was trying to give you a better life. No, I said softly. You were trying to edit mine until only your name was left. Behind him, guests gathered at the open chapel doors, blurred faces peering into the rain. My mother stood among them, one hand pressed to her heart. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to apologize for the shame, the shock, the broken ceremony. But another part of me knew women had been apologizing for their own escape for far too long. Ryan noticed the audience and changed his tone immediately. Emily, sweetheart, please. Let us talk privately. The sweetness in his voice made my stomach turn because I finally recognized it as performance. No more private conversations where you tell me what I feel afterward. A murmur moved through the doorway. Ryan's father stepped out behind him, cane in hand, his face pale with fury. Young lady, you're being manipulated. I looked at him. Really looked. This old man with his expensive suit, his perfect posture, his family name pressed like a seal over secrets. Maybe, I said. But not by the person you want me to fear. Ethan's eyes lifted to mine. Something passed across his face, not triumph, not possession, but pain mixed with pride. Ryan saw it and lost the careful mask for one dangerous second. You think he came back for love? He snapped. He came back because you are useful. The word hit the rain between us. Useful. Not beloved. Not chosen. Useful. I almost smiled because he had finally stopped pretending. Thank you, I said. Ryan blinked. For what? For saying the quiet part out loud. I turned and walked back toward the chapel doors, not to return to him, but to face everyone who had watched me almost disappear. My wet dress dragged behind me. My bare feet left prints on the stone. When I reached the top step, I looked at the guests, then at the minister, then at my mother. There will be no wedding today, I said. My voice did not shake. Not because Ethan Blackwell stopped it. Because I am stopping it. The silence that followed felt clean. Ryan moved as if to speak, but Ethan's voice came from behind me, calm and low. Let her finish. I did not turn around, but I felt the room obey him. I hated that power. I needed it. Both things were true. I lifted the silver bracelet and let everyone see it. I spent 12 years thinking my first heartbreak made me weak. It did not. It taught me the sound of my own heart when everyone else tried to talk over it. Then I looked at Ryan one last time. You wanted a bride. What you got was a witness. His face went still. The rain softened. Somewhere below me, Ethan drew in a breath like my words had reached a place in him no empire ever had. And for the first time that day, the chapel doors behind me did not feel like an entrance or an exit. They felt like evidence that I had survived both. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The rain did what people could not. It softened the edges of the ruined afternoon, washing candle smoke from the doorway, loosening rose petals from the white arches, turning the stone steps beneath me into a mirror of gray sky. Ryan stood a few feet away, his face pale with the kind of anger that had no audience left to impress. His father whispered something to him, sharp and urgent, but I did not listen. I had spent too much of my life listening to men discuss my future as if I were not standing in the room. My mother came toward me first. Her heels clicked carefully across the whetstone, her small purse clutched in both hands. For one terrible second, I thought she would ask me to reconsider, to think of the guests, the money, the shame. Instead, she stopped in front of me and touched my cheek with trembling fingers. Are you safe? She whispered. The question broke something open in me. Not because I knew the answer, but because it was the first time all day someone had asked about me instead of the wedding. I covered her hand with mine. I am trying to be. Her eyes moved past me to Ethan, cautious and afraid. I understood. He looked like every warning a mother would give her daughter. Tall, silent, rain dark on his black suit, ink visible at his wrist, men waiting near the curb like shadows that belonged to him. But when my mother looked back at me, she must have seen something steadier than fear. She nodded once and stepped away. Ryan said my name again, quieter this time, but it no longer had a place to land. I turned from him and walked down the chapel steps. Ethan did not open the car door for me like I was expected to climb inside. He did not reach for my hand. He walked beside me, leaving 2 feet of rain and history between us, as if that space were sacred. At the curb, I stopped. The black car hummed softly. The city smelled like wet pavement, gasoline, and roses crushed under expensive shoes. Ethan looked at me, and without the chapel lights, without the crowd, without Ryan standing between us, I saw how tired he was. Not weak. Never weak. But worn down in places power could not protect. "Where will you go?" he asked. "Not come with me. Not you or mine. Just where?" I almost smiled through the ache in my throat. "Somewhere that does not belong to either of you." He accepted that with a slow nod, but pain moved through his eyes before he lowered them. "I can have a car take you anywhere. Your apartment. Your mother's. A hotel under another name." "And you?" I asked. His mouth tightened. "I will make sure Ryan cannot reach you again." The old part of me, the girl who had loved him under summer stars, wanted to step closer. The woman who had walked out of her own wedding knew better than to confuse protection with healing. "Ethan," I said softly, "do not turn my freedom into another war." He went still. Rain slipped from his hair to his jaw. Then he gave me the smallest nod. "Then I will do it your way." Those 6 words felt impossible coming from him. Maybe that was why I finally opened my hand and held out the bracelet. His face changed, just slightly, like he thought I was giving it back. Instead, I took his left wrist and turned it gently beneath the rain. The tattoo was darker up close. October 17th. Black lines around old scars I would never ask about in public. And there, hidden beneath the curve of ink, were my initials. E.C., smaller than the date, quieter than the design. Permanent anyway. My breath caught. "You carried me," I whispered. His voice was rough. "Every day." I let go before the moment could become a promise neither of us was ready to keep. Behind us, the chapel doors remained open, spilling gold light onto the rain. In front of us, the street stretched wet and uncertain through Brooklyn. I stepped away from the car and began walking barefoot down the sidewalk, my torn dress brushing the pavement, the bracelet warm in my palm. Ethan followed at a respectful distance, not as a savior, not as an owner, but as a man learning the shape of forgiveness one step behind me. I had thought love was the person who stopped the wedding. I was wrong. Love was the silence afterward, when no one forced me to choose before I learned how to choose myself.